bum ba-da-dum bum ba-da-dum bum.
Oh, man.
Oh, God, that... Okay, spoiler alert.
We're spoiling everything.
If you haven't watched Game of Thrones yet, and you plan to,
Just
do not listen to
don't
this
bother.
episode.
You know what? Watch Breaking Bad. How about that?
No, what you do is you watch up to season 6, and then you decide to read the books.
Yeah, and then you just, you take
just
inventory.
Wait. Just wait for Winds of Winter and A Dance of Spring. Or
Whatever it is,
whatever
man.
the hell it is, a Vision of Spring, or whatever the heck he's calling it.
Man, I don't even know where to start with this. Okay, so, like, I know that it needs to end in a certain way, right? Like, I get that there has to be certain conclusions that have to be come out in the final episode, which is cool, right? I was okay with the Sopranos final, actually. And going back to Breaking Bad, best ending, I think one of the best endings of a series, period. But I just feel like I don't necessarily disagree with where they got to. It's just how they got there that I think is killing me.
Yeah.
Still.
I don't doubt that is the kind of ending we will likely get from George R.R. Martin.
Yeah.
The difference is that I think a lot of the plot points that George R.R. Martin introduced in the books, and of course you're always going to introduce them in the books, and they can't always be made into the show. But I think a lot of those plot points were they ignored them at the time, and I don't think they realized how important they would end up being.
It's an interesting point.
Until they got to, like, season 7, and they were like, oh, crap, we have no explanation for any of this stuff.
We're running light on it. Sort of the depth of the story is not there anymore.
How did you think the ending was going to go?
All right, so I thought that the ending would... up to the last 2 episodes, I thought that she would have taken a slightly different tact in with the dragon, and it would have come down to maybe not a total siege of the city, but then something like Arya would have snuck in and killed Cersei, or there would have been more of this sort of interpersonal politics than actually we're going to burn the entire thing, right? Like, I feel like she would have gotten the throne, but it wouldn't have been through a total front attack. Like, that could have been happening, in the background, but it wasn't really going to be the forefront of the story. But I also thought that, the White Walkers kind of would have had more of a presence up past what was it, season 3?
Yeah,
episode 3?
Yeah, I expected the long night to be long. Not long was metaphorical and like everyone was tired from fighting all night and not dying. I kind of figured,
Right?
Yeah.
I was also expecting more casualties out of that.
Yeah.
Than what we got. So I kind of felt like between those 2 whole events, it was a little like, like we had 2 huge fight scenes. I feel like you could have done one or the other, but like what happened in King's Landing should have been much more of a psychological game.
Yeah.
Than than the White Walkers attacking. Although I thought like there was some really good stuff with that, but I also thought, man, again, like I don't know, like I keep like I don't want to like relitigate or Monday morning quarterback this whole thing, but I do feel like I don't know why I'm so unhappy with it. If it was so, it should be more satisfying than
because I think that there are a lot of things that, again, I think there are a lot of things they introduced because George R.R. Martin had a plan already in place for how some things would go. And then he was essentially like, well, I know how I want it to end. I know where I want the characters to end up. But I don't necessarily even know how that's going to happen just yet. So we're going to work together to figure it out. And then I think that what they did was to try to clean up some of that. they got rid of characters who didn't have a clear ending yet in the books, and then they just kind of screwed everything over. You know, so like Arya becoming a faceless man.
Why? Why bother?
Had absolutely no just to kill the Walders, or the Freys rather. You know, that had absolutely no effect.
Don't get me wrong.
It was great. It was awesome, but it had absolutely no effect ultimately on the plot. They could have just ignored them like they ignored every other house besides. I mean, you know, to have a guy from Dorne there at the end, like who is that? Who's that guy?
Well, but I mean, like, why is Jon a Targaryen? Like, that was one of the biggest things that kind of like, okay, so they built that. They had subtle clues. Everyone was like, I don't know, I think it is. I think A plus blah, blah equals J. And everyone was like, and then they actually made it happen. And you're like, oh, what's this gonna do?
Right, and it meant nothing.
Oh, you know, no, it's meant 2 terse conversations and nothing.
No. So I think in the books what's going to happen, I think Bran will end up as the king. But I think...
Which again, what? Are you kidding me? Why is he the king? I think he should be evil. Like, I don't necessarily trust Bran.
That's what I think. That's what I think will happen.
Yeah.
Is I think essentially Bran... There was actually a really good... there was a really, really good thread on this on Reddit that was originally from the Game of Thrones... Originally from the Game of Thrones, like, wiki forums. And it was on this idea that Bran is supposed to be following the same story as the Fisher King from Arthurian legends. So essentially, in the Fisher King was also known as the Crippled King. And so what happened was this king, or their father or something, whatever, made the gods unhappy by leaving his home. Leaving his central location where he was supposed to reside. And so then all this bad stuff happened and the people were, you know, starving. And then this crippled prince was able to magically give them fish. And that's why he was called the Fisher King. And so they subsisted only on fish through this terrible winter. And then at the end of it, this magical, he became this like magical godlike creature on Earth who lived to be, 8,000 years old or whatever. So I think that Bran will end up being the king. The way that I think that will happen is I essentially think that Bran has been, as Bloodraven, as the Three-Eyed Raven, Bran has been planning these events to occur in a certain way this entire time.
I agree with you, because he's the one who disclosed that he was a Targaryen, that Jon was a Targaryen.
Yes. And so I think that his role is bigger than... His role is bigger than the simple role, than the role that they gave him in the show. And I think that the reason that it'll be, I think obviously it has to be bigger because he becomes king, but I think the reason that they didn't do that in the show is because so much of the extra stuff around him has not been fleshed out in the books. Like, we have no idea, the Children of the Forest created the White Walkers.
Right.
It seems like, but we don't know why. I mean, we kind of know why, to fight the men, to fight back the first men and the Andals, but we don't really know. We know nothing else about that, And then, of course,
Wouldn't that have been something they could have started with season, like?
Yeah, I mean,
maybe as flashbacks in season 8, right? Like, just getting ready for the fight, and all of a sudden you have these flashbacks about that.
Just anything, Even if the Green Seers and the Children of the Forest come to Bran and say, even if they just said to him, like, listen, you need to become king and rebuild the kingdom because the White Walkers aren't dead, right? They're like a natural force. They come back.
Right.
And so you need to protect them. You essentially, this is the way it has to work, right? Your brother, Jon, has to become a king beyond the wall to keep the White Walkers at bay and to bring back the religion of the old gods. Whatever, right? All this they could have done all kinds of different things.
They could have done some good stuff.
We don't know how Bran's story is going to go, but I do think he will end up as king, or at least I hope so. But I do hope that he's kind of evil. With Daenerys, I think what probably should have happened, and I was arguing about this with some of my friends too. We were like talking about it the other day. But first off, in the books, I'm like almost certain that what's going to happen is the fake Targaryen kid who's been living in Pentos this entire time, who they didn't introduce in the show, he will come and kill Cersei somehow, or maybe Arya does it or whatever. But this other guy, Aegon, the fake Targaryen, will take the throne from Cersei. And the people will love him, even though he's not a true Targaryen.
Ooh.
And so Daenerys will come with a dragon, and they're going to fight against her, and she will become so enraged that they love this guy who has no claim to the throne, who's a false pretender, and that's who Varys will betray her for him, because in the books he's been working for him this entire time. Right?
See, that makes so much more sense.
Now, the other thing I was thinking, even if they don't want to have that in the show, right? What I think they should have done is when Daenerys was on Drogon on the wall. I wish that they had shown us something from her point of view, like she's looking down and a lord in fine raiment, a lord who richly dressed or whatever, is murdering a kid or is stealing gold or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's where they dropped the thread. It's like I don't get that she's mad. I don't see her as mad. I mean,
no.
Even though they gave exposition of like, no, she just saw one of her dragons shot down. She just saw her best friend beheaded.
Well, see, so their argument I think that Tyrion makes, which is this entire time we've been cheering for her because she's been killing bad people.
Right.
But when she comes to our shores and our customs seem evil to her, suddenly we're up in arms. Right? I think that's a very compelling argument, and I think it's a really good story. But I just want to have some reason for us as the audience to also maybe feel like she was right. Do you know what I mean? Like if they had shown Cersei like, killing children or something, do something evil instead of just slurping wine from her balcony. You know what I mean?
I kind of like that part. I was like,
essentially all Cersei has done for the last like 3 fucking seasons is she killed everyone in the Sept, but all those were shitty people anyway, so who cares?
But were they? I mean, she took out a lot of people, right? She took out everybody.
Right, but since that time,
in that radiance.
But since that time, what has she done that's been evil? Do you know what I mean? Even if they showed Daenerys, even if they had showed Daenerys like on the wall of the city on Drogon, and then peasants running in fear from her, and her being like, "No, wait, I'm your savior. I'm your savior. I'm gonna kill Queen Cersei," right? Even if they had just shown that the people were like, just some reason for Daenerys to think the people of King's Landing were as evil and as deserving of Dragonfire as the people in Slaver's Bay. Right?
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I feel like they copped out on that entire thing because I don't know why. Like, again, like I don't even think they needed to have that entire fight.
No.
She could have gone and she could have just done the surgical strike on the Red Keep and knocked it down and dragged Cersei into the dragon, whatever that thing is, they always have the tribunal, right? The pit, and had this sort of emotional battle over the throne, right? Where they could have called her on her behavior. Like they could have said, like, he's, here you are, and you come to our, like you said, you come to our, of course you kill evil men when it's convenient. But, how many people did you just kill by coming to get me here? And she, they could have had sort of more of this. Well, yeah. It could still end in some bloodshed, but it's sort of like, I feel like what I really liked about it was, at the, like season 1, again, when they killed one of the major characters totally without us even being aware of it, that was really going to happen if you hadn't read the books, was psychological. It was all about things happening in discussion and not about huge battles. And this whole thing was about huge battles. Now, one interesting theory that I was listening to on Nerdette Recap with Peter Sagal, Game of Thrones. Peter Sagal came up with Peter Sagal, who is the host of Wait, Don't Tell Me, said that he thought a good ending would have been. All right, so again, they're up in the throne room. Jon has just killed Dany. The guards are running. You can hear the commotion. The dragon comes up. Jon goes. He approaches the Iron Throne. He sits down on the Iron Throne. pauses for a minute, looks up at the dragon, and says, Dracarys. And the dragon flames him and the throne. Right? Right? I was listening to that today, and I was like, yes, that's a perfect, like, again, like, acknowledging that he's a Targaryen. He's the last Targaryen to sit on the Iron Throne, and he controls sort of, there's the emotional, like, I think one of my big beefs with this whole thing was that Jon didn't die, right? He didn't have sort of this closure or sacrifice or,
well, so that's the thing, though, right? He's not the whole thing. The part of this whole thing that was, I like that ending. I do.
I like it.
The part of this, though,
I like it.
The part of this that I found the most frustrating was this entire time, George R.R. Martin has built this interwoven fabric of these very complicated. Okay, I'm also a huge Harry Potter nerd. Harry Potter nerd.
No, it's okay.
And one of my favorite memories from like being a teenager,
it's the end of the book.
Well, no, not the end of the book.
Okay.
It's the period in between the 6th and the 7th book where we knew that Voldemort had made Horcruxes. We knew what 3 of them were.
Right.
But we didn't know what the other 4 were. And so people were combing. Like, I remember spending hours on the Leaky Cauldron, which was this forum back in the day.
I remember.
Where
yes,
I remember spending hours combing through the books and trying to figure out what could these Horcruxes be. I remember the first thread that said that the locket he found in the room of remembrance, the room of need, or whatever the hell that room is, right? The hall that appears out of nowhere when you need it, right? I'll never forget the first thread I read where they said that was he's gonna find a piece of Ravenclaw's like her tiara or her gem or sapphire or something in that room. And people were like, no way, right? And that's exactly what freaking happened in the book. He used Ravenclaw's tiara. He hid it in Hogwarts because he was obsessed with Hogwarts, right? That kind of stuff that's the kind of stuff about these fantasy worlds that I love so much. And so to have...
There's a payoff, right? There's some gravitas and some payoff. So interestingly, and where you were going with this is just, again, if you have not heard, you should listen to it, because Peter Sagal goes on to say, one of his most favorite endings was the end of Harry Potter. Because again, like Harry Potter, he faces his death. He believes he's going to die, and he does it anyways because it is for the good, right? He doesn't, but he faces it. And I think that's what's missing. That sort of reckoning is what's missing at the end of this. Well, so we also got it at the end of Breaking Bad, right? Breaking Bad dies.
Here's the thing, right? I think it would have been better if Jon didn't die.
Oh my God.
He's a Targaryen. The dragon fire cannot kill him.
Oh, that could be true.
He's a Targaryen, right?
Ah.
So it would have been, I think, better if he stood there, said Dracarys, it burns away his, his clothing, just like it did for Dany. And then he comes out with, the silver ashen hair and the purple eyes of a Targaryen or something. Or even the guards come rushing up, and then Drogon turns to them and breathes fire on them to defend Jon because he is the last Targaryen. Right? The final proof of his blood. And then Jon and Drogon fly away to the north or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I think
something.
So here's the reason why I don't like the idea of Jon dying is that the entire prophecy of the prophecy of Ice and Fire, the Song of Ice and Fire, is this story of Azor Ahai who kills his love Nissa with a sword, the blood of which quenches the blade and creates Lightbringer, the bane of darkness, right? Jon didn't even. What
happened to that?
That was the whole prophecy was that Daenerys was Nissa, Jon was Azor Ahai, and he was going to kill her when she went mad with his sword, which would become Lightbringer, and then he would be the prince that was promised and end the Night King's wrath on humans. Instead, the Night King died immediately from Arya randomly jumping out of the trees with a dagger.
Which was still pretty dope.
Which was dope,
one of my
fine.
favorite moves.
But then he doesn't even kill her with a sword, he kills her with a dagger.
Well, but so doesn't pay off. Like anything that they set up, and this is my beef with a lot of sort of these types of shows, Lost included. If you set up a mythology, if you have me hanging on that mythology and you are referencing that mythology, that's a part of the narrative. If you decide within the last, couple of seasons, last season or so, to cop out on that, you can't expect me not to want resolution.
Absolutely.
Like, you have created this narrative in this story. I have bought into this narrative in this story. We're in an agreement that this is part of that. And it's sort of a non-verbal agreement. Again, like, it's just like, I feel like you can't expect people to not be upset. Just like the same thing with Lost. I feel like I was even more irate with Lost, but I feel like that was, you have created something, everyone has bought into it. If you decide not to actually answer those questions, or at least, you should at least acknowledge those questions. Well, they didn't even. You don't have to answer them in a successful or a closed way, right? But you should have some sort of a response.
No, exactly.
I didn't.
No, Game of Thrones.
Who cares?
Game of Thrones was never supposed to have a happy ending, right? No. It's not supposed to be that kind of show.
I don't want a happy ending.
That's not the world that George R. R. Martin created. But again, it's kind of like, it's sort of a,
But they kind of did give it a happy ending.
They totally did. Well, that's the thing, right?
Gave it a happy ending.
It's the feeling of, I think, respect for your fans and respect for a group of people who've spent so much time with these characters, that if you, like you said, if you introduce a thread or you introduce a theme or an idea, I want to see it come to its conclusion. And of course, there are some threads that can't, right?
Right.
But they managed to do it for so many other parts of the story that it's intensely frustrating. I mean, again, the Valancourt, right? The brother. Cersei was supposed to die with her brothers, her older or her younger brothers, rather, hands around her neck, right? Which led people to think Jaime was going to murder her at the end, right? Or something. And that was the way that prophecy had always gone.
Yes.
I was fine with the way that, I would have been fine with Cersei and Jaime dying together. But at least, I don't know, put his arms around her damn neck, something. You know what I mean? Like, just recognize this thread you've created. So, I mean, that didn't make any sense. Sansa taking the North? How does that frickin' work? What? The prince, what was her name? Maggie that told Cersei that another queen would come.
There'd be a younger queen.
Younger and more beautiful. That's why there's all these things online where it's just Bran sitting by the weirwood with his legs out, younger and more beautiful.
But that's it's sort of, that's what I don't like. I get that, I get that you shouldn't feel overtly entitled to, in your fandom, right? Like, as a fan, you don't really have control over what the decisions are of it getting made. I do think that, and so I get that, like, and I can respect that, but I think where I don't know if they were starting to play with it is they do give some nods. They give some fan, they throw some sweethearts out there, like, oh, and you can tell that they were wanting to engage the audience in a certain way with certain stuff and certain lines. And, again, it's like fan favorite. Oh, look, it's Arya and the Hound. They're back together on a road trip. That's the shit we love. Right?
Yeah.
This is not, but that's, again, like, you can't do that and kind of have that type of engagement and have a mythology and have people really love something and think that you're not responsible for it.
No.
Or if you have this result and people are mad, that you're sort of like, I don't understand why people are mad. It's like, well, because,
So the Stark, the Stark/Targaryen kids, where did you think they would end up at the end of the series? Let's close off with that.
Okay, so I thought Jon would be, I was sure that Jon was going to be dead. I kind of thought that Sansa would probably not make it either. Bran would be kind of in exile as a three-eyed raven.
Yep.
And would be whatever, living in the forest, kind of reestablishing whatever. And Arya is the only ending that I'm like, okay, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with Arya going off to the New World. That's good.
See, okay.
Okay. That was it. Like that to me, but it's like, oh, look, how convenient. They all ended up in some form of power, right? And I'm like, and again, with Bran, I was just like, how is he going to be a good ruler? Like, I honestly don't think he's going to be a good ruler. He has no passion for ruling. And they're all like, well, that's what makes him. No, No, it's not. It's not. I don't think it is. But I wasn't there, so that's okay.
Yeah. So I thought,
what'd you think?
I thought that Bran was going to do some kind of magic or something cool. You know what I mean? Like, I
You were going for the big, like he was going to time travel that stuff?
Or like, I don't know, he would warg into a dragon and cause another one to fly over from a shy or something cool. I expected him to do something.
Why bother having him warg? What good was that?
Exactly.
Where
nothing,
was that?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Right?
No warging.
I expected Bran, at the end of the series, what I expected, honestly, I expected Sansa and Tyrion to end up on the throne together.
Okay.
I expected Bran and Jon to go up north to the wall.
Okay.
I expected Jon to become essentially like the king of the Northmen, right? And I expected Bran to become the three-eyed raven and essentially help to rebuild magic, right?
Yeah.
And I actually liked what happened with Arya and the Hound, where the Hound told her revenge is going to kill you like it's going to kill me in a couple minutes. But I actually was hoping that then the Faceless Men would come for Arya and kill her.
What? Ooh, you see, but again, where's the Faceless Men, right?
They're gone.
Or just where's all of the wizards, all the people that Dany ticked off, right? In Marine and all those other places, where are they at?
Well, they kept, they kept hinting that magic had finally come back, right?
Yeah, not so much.
And I would have really liked to have seen that. I kind of, it's funny. Sansa is one of those characters where in the books, you read Sansa's chapters in the first book and you're like, it's kind of your fault. Like it's kind of all your fault. Like you kind of made all this happen because you were too stupid to realize that the fairy tales are just fairy tales, right?
Right.
But then, and so at the end of the first book, you really, at least me, I really didn't like Sansa. But then all this terrible stuff happens to her. And it's it becomes almost like, holy crap, like just learn. You just want her to learn that it's all fairy tale and it's not real and it's bad stuff's going to happen to you. And then in the show, she finally was like, screw this. It's all fake. I'm going to start killing people. And it was awesome. Like Sansa turned into one of my favorite characters. And then at the end of the series, she just sucked so bad. She sucked. It sucked.
I kind of felt like she just went very flat. Like her character was a badass, but it was a very flat badass. Like I think, again, like, I don't know. This is the other thing I felt happened was sort of the flavor that each of those characters had, good, bad, and different, even if you didn't like them, sort of got streamlined and sort of flattened out.
Yeah,
in that last season, right? For the sake of people wandering around burnt cities, I guess. I don't know.
The most frustrating thing about all this is knowing that the writers and the people that directed the show were offered like 10 seasons. They were offered another 2 seasons to wrap this all up. And they said no.
Well, that's because they got to get on to that Star Wars. They're going to be doing the next Star Wars, which I'm not...
Time to ruin Space Knights.
Oh, don't even. Like, that's the thing. I'm like, oh, no, you don't.
Did you see that funny... No. Did you see that funny... There was a thing that was going around, which was like a fake after the episode kind of thing. And so it was these 2 guys pretending to be the 2 of them, and one of them goes, oh, you guys ready for Star Wars? We bring back Jar Jar Binks!
See, but you don't know, right?
It's absolutely going to happen, Marie. Jar Jar's coming back.
Oh, God.
I guarantee it. All right. Listeners, okay. What did you think was supposed to happen on Game of Thrones? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you upset as we are? Let us know.
Half of the viewers are probably like, no, I was just reading books and having a life during that time.
No, that's not what I was doing.
Whatever.
Oh, my goodness. All right, dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to the Mad Scientist Podcast. This has been, as always, your host, Chris Cogswell, with my co-host, Marie Mayhew.
Million beers.
Million beers. All right, good night. Thank you again, dear listeners, for listening to the Mad Scientist Podcast. I have been your host, Chris Cogswell, joined by my co-host,
Marie Mayhew.
If you'd like to contact the show, please send us an email at themadscientistpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. You can also follow us on Twitter at Mad Scientist Pod or at Team Giant Squid for Marie. And of course, you can see us on Facebook, on Instagram, and all over the internet as the Mad Scientist Podcast. And again, our logo is the one with the pumpkin head, so it's easy to see.
Mm-hmm.
If you've enjoyed the show tonight, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where the money that you give to us will help us to promote this show further, to make it better, and just to spend more time making it.
Because we love doing that.
We do love doing that. Our logo was designed by Carrie Shaheen. Our web design is done by Desdemona Howard.
Woohoo!
And our sound design is done by Jake Cardinal. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you. This has been a Damn It Chippy production.